who need it most. A week after the devastating cyclone, the United Nations says some aid is slowly starting to trickle through, but not enough to avert a humanitarian disaster. Here's what we know so far about the aftermath of Cyclone Nargis. Well, the official death toll now stands at 23,335, but senior diplomats in Yangon fear the final toll could exceed 100,000, and aid agencies are saying 1.9 million survivors are now at risk. One of our correspondents in Myanmar sent this report on the struggle families and farmers are facing in the Irrawaddy Delta.
The Irrawaddy Delta, the rice bowl of Myanmar. For mile after mile, the heavy smell of rotten rice greets us. Farmers are on the road in makeshift huts after their houses were smashed by Cyclone Nargis. They are guarding what is left of their precious food grain. This woman had borrowed money to buy fertilizer to plant the rice. Now the rice is all gone and she's in severe debt.
I've lost everything. My family survived, but we have nothing. Nothing to eat, nothing to wear, no water to drink. This is a terrible life.
She offered to take us to her house on a small dry patch of land in the middle of the inundated rice fields.
It's terrible, and now we'll probably die of cholera.
Her physical wounds have started to heal, but she has no idea how to feed her 3 children. She cannot even sleep here. Her family shares a hut with 2 other families. 15 people cram into this space every night. This man had 700 baskets of rice, almost 200 sacks, before the cyclone. Everything is now wet, and they're trying to save every grain of rice. And yet, they were offering us food.
The authorities were distributing 3 cans of rice per family. We were supposed to get 12, but we didn't. They said we were rich, but we don't have rice that is edible. We have to buy it. We walk for an hour to get water from a lake, but even that is polluted. It smells and it is salty.
I dared not drink the water, but the smell was certainly there. And it's not a surprise. The water is shared by corpses like these, bloated animals rotting for over a week. But these people do not have a choice. As the woman said, life is terrible and there is a danger that they will die of disease. Al Jazeera, Irrawaddy Delta, Myanmar.
Well, with that aid still struggling to get through, some communities are having to fend for themselves as best they can. One monastery in the south of the country is being used as a shelter for the homeless, even though it has no roof to keep the rain out.
As Myanmar waits for help, those who survived Cyclone Nargis are rebuilding as best they can. This monastery east of Yangon gave shelter to the homeless after the storm, despite its roof being ripped off. One monk, Lakna, told me,
The storm began at midnight. An entire wall collapsed at 2 a.m. It was chaos. In the morning, everything was flattened.
As the shock of the storm subsides, its consequences come to the fore. In Yangon, drivers wait in line for fuel that may take days to come. Petrol now costs 5 times what it did a week ago. Outside the city, the rice crop was ruined. Supplies of essential goods are drying up. Without an increase in the trickle of foreign aid reaching the country, the poor will become increasingly desperate. This shopkeeper told me prices have risen by 50% and theft is on the increase. Those with least to lose have suffered most. 51 people call these tiny huts home. Everything here was flattened by the cyclone. 12-year-old Amaji said she'd been terrified and ran away. When she came back, everything had gone. A week on, they've restored what they can. But the storm robbed her parents of their homes and their jobs, as a local factory was destroyed. Like the rest of southern Myanmar, they face a bleak future, unless the military government bows to pressure and accepts help from the world beyond its borders. Al Jazeera, Yangon.
Well, while Myanmar's southern states are in the grip of the country's worst ever natural disaster, in the north, people have spent the day voting. In their first poll since 1990, Myanmar's voters appear to have overwhelmingly accepted the country's new constitution. Cyclone Nargis forced the military to postpone the vote for 2 weeks in the 5 worst affected areas, but in the rest of the country, it just went on. Amid reports of voter intimidation, there are many concerns about the proposed new constitution. For one, the writing team which drafted it was chosen by the military. The constitution will reserve 25% of the seats in both houses of parliament for the military. It also bans anyone who married a foreigner from running for office, a clause which seems to be tailored to rule out Aung San Suu Kyi. But as Tony Cheng now reports from Mawadi in Myanmar, many voters didn't know exactly what they were voting for.
The town of Mawadi, just across the border from Thailand, a hive of activity, especially today, election day. Polling started early, a national referendum to pass or reject the new constitution, a constitution that's been 14 years in the making. At the polling booths themselves, security was tight. Many have complained of government and army intimidation. We had to film covertly to avoid detection. The new constitution guarantees that the army retains at least 25% of any government. On the streets, everything was much more relaxed. Despite pressure for people to attend the polls, no one seemed that sure what the referendum was about. Here in one of the shanty towns over the border in Myanmar, people are being urged by loudspeaker to go out and vote in today's referendum. The problem is most people here are illiterate. They can't understand the hundreds of pages of their new constitution. Nonetheless, they're so unhappy with the government that many of them have learned to put X in the no box. There is a deep unhappiness here at the government of Myanmar. In 50 years, this has gone from one of Asia's richest countries to one of the poorest. This part of the country was virtually untouched by Cyclone Nargis, but still, you feel the people have nothing to lose. This family of 9 exists on less than $1 a day. In a small bamboo hut sitting on top of a pool of raw sewage, they prepare snacks that they sell in the market. They told me that they couldn't even read the Constitution, let alone understand it, but still, they'd be voting no. We all got together and decided to put X in the no box, the mother of the family says. It seems that she's not worried about the possible consequences. And another man who defied the government to say no, Kun Myen Tun, an elected MP and part of the National Assembly that was nominated with drafting the document. When he walked out of the process in protest, his reward was 7 years in jail.
This constitution cannot present the Burma because it is only a sham. This is not a people referendum, it is only a sham.
And it seems that unspoken and stubborn resistance to the military government will remain, although a yes result will return the people of Myanmar to a government that appears unmoved and resistant to helping them in their darkest hour. Tony Cheng, Al Jazeera, Mawadi, Myanmar.
Well, here with us now to give us a better insight into the workings of Myanmar's highly secretive government is Dr. Zarni, a visiting research fellow at Oxford University. And you're from Myanmar, aren't you? And you founded the Free Burma Coalition.
That's right. I lived in Burma for 25 years before I left the country to study in the West.
Okay, so you know the country extremely well. The first question I'd like to ask, and the question that many people will be asking, is why are the military rulers so reluctant to let aid and aid workers in, given the terrible destruction that we've seen?
Yeah, I think there is no single factor that explains that question. I think there are four factors that we need to look at. One is nationalism that is pervasive within the military as an dominant institution. And the second factor is the paranoia, at the leadership level, because this is a regime that has been at war, as it were, with the Western countries that want to see change on the ground, and they're resisting. And then thirdly, the deeply tyrannical and delusional nature of a single senior general. His name is Senior General Tan Shui, and I would put him in the league with, Kim or North Korea or Saddam of Iraq. That kind of leadership, and he makes the decision on every important issues, and he's in his 70s, and the welfare of the public is no longer on his mind. It's how his legacy and making sure that he doesn't face the sacking that his former boss faced, Ne Win.
If that's the case, then you'd think that he would be concerned that his legacy will be the aftermath of this cyclone and the terrible destruction that he hasn't dealt with.
Yeah, well, I think he seems to be delusionally thinking that his legacy would be that he is the general who put the country on the path of democracy. That's why they are ramming through this, so-called constitutional referendum, and then this was held to today. And so, in the face of 100,000 dead and 2 million homeless, this is the single leader that has ordered every single deputy of his to go ahead with this. No one dares to question his wisdom. That's the problem.
Okay, let's look at the longer term political question if we can. Where do you see this ending up? Once all the mess has been cleared up, what do you think will happen to this junta?
Well, medium term, the food and aid need to be delivered, and negotiations have to be exhausted so that both sides can meet halfway, the West and the junta. And the long-term solution, this is the regime that is not serving the public interest in the country. It's more than clear. This is a regime whose nature is very callous. And so I think over the past 45 or 46 years since the military came to power, there are a series of mass revolt. The people of Burma attempted to change the regime on their own. They have not been able to do that because the regime is ruthless and entrenched.
Do you think it might happen this time after the aftermath of this?
With the push from the outside world, on grounds of humanitarian concerns, there's a worldwide concern on humanitarian issues right now. And, Bernard Kouchner's position on attempting to invoke the responsibility to protect, this is a perfect example where this doctrine needs to be tested.
So conversely, this could actually end up being an opportunity for Myanmar in the end.
Absolutely, because the situation in Myanmar or Burma has gone from worse to worst. It's not from bad to worse, it's worse from worse. So we always thought okay, this is the worst. No, I think the society can no longer take this regime anymore, and that something needs to be done. It is one thing that this regime has mowed down demonstrators and rebels on the streets, but another thing that they are, causing unnecessary suffering on a massive scale. This is a criminal negligence, and the international community needs to take up the challenge.
All right, Dr. Zarni, a fascinating perspective. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, still to come on the programme, the battle to be Zimbabwe's president, Morgan Tsvangirai, agrees to contest the presidential runoff. Now, a curfew is in place in Sudan's capital after fighting spread to Khartoum for the first time, despite decades of civil war in the country. The government says it's repelled an attack on the city's western suburbs by fighters from the Darfur Justice and Equality Movement. Tanya Page has this report.